Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening in person and online. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land that's never been ceded with the Indigenous people. Here we're on the land of the Wongal and the Gadigal people, part of the Eora Nation, and we acknowledge the contribution that they've made into showing us how to look after the land sustainably for many millennia. Some valuable lessons there. So tonight, I'm glad to welcome Dr. Stephen Dew, a Sydney-based dentist with nearly 30 years of clinical experience. And he is a tireless advocate for sustainability, electrification, and all forms of electric vehicles. He's currently Vice Chair of the Australian Electric Vehicle Association, AEVA, and a New South Wales representative of the Tesla Owners Club of Australia. So he has a lot of knowledge about EVs, and it's a real honour to welcome him here tonight to shed some light on this, what's a pivotal topic, I think, for us as a society. The uptake of EVs, I think, is going to be a huge game changer over the next 10 years. I don't think we've all fully realised the consequences of that. So part of this is just so we can all be a bit better prepared. So could you please welcome Stephen?
Good evening, everyone. Just a bit of housekeeping. I've got a lot of slides tonight, so maybe to get your iPhone out and you can scan that, and you'll be able to get a copy of this this presentation at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Graham, for inviting me to talk tonight. I'm honoured to be here, and I'm very excited to do what I really love, which is talk about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles really have hypercharged the way that I see the world, and I hope that you will come along my journey as well. It's not just about a vehicle to get from A to B with electricity, but it's also a way of life, and we use electric vehicles to integrate into our other parts of our household, our economy, and so forth. So just a brief understanding to see where we're all coming from. Who here likes to take public transport, walking? That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And anyone who's driven a petrol car, a diesel car, gasoline, or what we call internal combustion engine? Yeah, pretty much everyone, I'd say. Yeah. How about an electric vehicle? Are we all here to explore? Yes. Have we got electric vehicles, anyone? I can see a couple of hands there. Do you know that electric vehicles will be the future, or are you having some doubts? Are you seeing that electric vehicles are any different from a petrol car? It's really no difference. It's just a different way of propulsion. So one, we need a fuel source from fossil fuel, and we burn the fossil fuel to generate the heat and drive the engine and turn the wheels. But in the case of electric vehicles, it's pretty much all in the batteries, and the batteries will supply the power, and that moves the engine, which turns the wheels. How about if you're scared about the future, electric vehicle is going to take off? When you look at graphs like this, it's an exponential growth. So I don't think there's anything that, if you're concerned about, are you going to a technology that's going to be phased out in the future? Not in, I think, my lifetime. How about hydrogen? Because occasionally, like, people get excited about a talk like this, and they go on the internet, and then they find out, oh, by the way, there's water-based engines, hydrogen, and all that. Has anyone got any idea about is this a good technology or not? No.
Well, no, the dropping hydrogen in California.
That's correct, yeah. And it's quite amazing when the times that I speak to people about electric vehicles, sometimes they'll give me some problem, or it doesn't go up the hill, it doesn't charge quick enough, and by the way, I'm waiting for a hydrogen car. So While it's, in my opinion, and the Electric Vehicle Association, we don't believe in the hydrogen technology. It's good to know that when you see these type of information, take a note of who's saying it, and then take a note deeper down, see what else are they saying about other things. So as you can see, it's very complex when you get to hydrogen. You've got to make the hydrogen, you've got to compress it, you've got to transport it. And then by the time it gets to the wheels, you lost pretty much about 60% of the energy. Whilst electric vehicles, the electricity can come from any source, from the solar panels, from a coal-fired station, from hydro, you know, from nuclear power even. And it's interesting, this the slide on the left here, on the right, just recently, that's the number of vehicles that Toyota, after investing so much money into it, they made 109 vehicles. And if you look online about, you know, there's a new engine that's going to destroy the electric vehicle technology, and it's going to be water-based, hydrogen, whatever. It's all based on, you know, Toyota. Yes.
The Toyota Mirai, the hydrogen gas tanks, they're actually very good in warfare because the Ukrainians are using them
Yes.
on robots to go into the trenches and get this enormous explosion.
Yes.
When they detonate the fuel tank.
That's
or
right.
the hydrogen.
So a couple of days ago, that was what I heard. So before I go on to the benefits of EVs and how to help you get it sooner, get the car that's the right size for you, and how to get it cheaper, I'd like to once again also acknowledge the country. And the reason for this is, you know, this acknowledgement to the country is acknowledging our traditional custodians, our elders, past, present, and emerging. And the central theme here is about connectivity to the past, the future, the land, and so forth. And there's one slide you may want to remember, and it's this slide here. Because if you apply this concept in a lot of things that in your life and going in the future, we can help to decipher what's right and what's wrong. And from that, we can help to make the right decisions. Because I can talk about EVs for 2.5 weeks, and I may be able to complete all the benefits currently, but it might take me 3 lifetimes to complete, you know, demystify all the myths about the EVs. And you need to start to solve that yourself, hopefully. Yes, so talking about connectivity, yes, these are the organizations, as Graham said, I've connected with. And without connectivity, we will be arguing about the same thing. As you see in this slide, the perception, is it a 6 or 9? In the world, we've got lots and lots of information. We need to decide what information is relevant to us. And it's out of the slide here, but that's the information. And then from that, we decide we can connect the points and what's relevant, and that's wisdom. And that's the understanding. And when we know the best way from A to B, then we create insight into what's best, what works, what doesn't. And wisdom is the best way to get from A to B. If we don't use our connectivity about all these points, about data, about our experience, about talk to the right people, we might get things like this. Talking about misinformation, taking out bits and pieces out of context, disinformation, conspiracy theories, myths, and all that. So this is a good slide to have as well. I got this recently. It's the Book of Myths on EVs. So it's very well written, and it's for, I'll go through it a bit later on. It's from the Fully Charged Life, which is a podcast I regularly listen to as well. And the best way to know about EVs, one of the best ways to do a test drive. And these people, they have come to Australia in 2023 and 2024, early this year, and they'll come back again in 2025 to showcase all the EVs that's available in Australia. Buying EVs is no different to any other purchase, and yet when we talk about EV, people seem to drop all the kind of common sense. When we buy a product, we always look at the pros and cons. We look at the cost versus the benefits. But there's much more to that. For example, the cost. When you're buying a TV, do you just look at time installments, $1,000 for the TV, or do you look at any ongoing cost? The ongoing cost for a TV is just the electricity, nothing else. Maybe your iPhone, you may buy an app. Yes, there may be some subscription model. And if you think about it, the petrol car or the ICE is giving you a subscription built in. We have to subscribe to their petrol station all the time. We have to go back and maintain them consistently at the dealer. Ongoing cost, quite a big difference with electric vehicles. So when we look at benefits, is it just about the soft seats, you know, about the range, about the vibration of the car, whatever? We need to look also about the longevity and the other aspects, such as the personal benefits, as well as the benefits in a broader spectrum, like globally, nationally, and so forth. Another way of looking at it is like this. So I talk to my patients a lot of time. I can give you 2 of these things at any one time, but it's very hard to give you 3 things. But with EVs, we may be able to achieve that. For example, it will save you money, it will provide you a lot of benefits, and it can save you a lot of time at the same time. And there's also personal benefits and the broader benefits to the community as well. With so many expos I've done, all these questions that come to me, I have to find out what the answers are to the questions, which is the benefits. And we fight misinformation with facts. So many benefits here. So I think the best way to make it easier for you to remember is create a poster like that on the side. So I've crystallized it down to 5 main benefits. If you hear any other benefits out there, that's wonderful if it exists. If it exists, then it's the future. Great, wonderful. But don't use those benefits that are outside of these benefits as a stumbling block, as a reason for you not to get an EV right away. So I've summarized the 5 points of the benefits of EVs. The first point being cost savings. And once again, they've also fall into other umbrellas in terms of, is it a benefit, is it saving time or saving money? So let's look at the cost savings. A few years ago, something like this, a hybrid would cost you $121,000 in 2007. That's what one of the EVs I had back then. So I've been driving EVs for quite some time, the hybrids, but my first 100% battery operated vehicle was in 2019. And to do a comparison, it's quite easy. Just look at the NRMA at the back of the magazine. There's usually a list of the prices there. This is the typical petrol car. You order that. And if you have a hybrid on top of that, it's added to the value of the cost of the car. So let's compare that with the most popular car in the world in the last 2 years. The Tesla Model Y is electric, and in the moment you can get it for $60,000. About 2 years ago, it was around $78,000. So it is dropping. It's not dropping because of lack of demand. It's because we're making mass production. We're getting to economies of scale. Just like the mobile phone. It's so cheap now, you can buy it for your children, not for the professionals anymore. A bit cheaper, the sedan. And these are about a couple of weeks ago. Even cheaper. But you get for what you pay. And look, that's even cheaper than your petrol car. This is the reason why petrol cars or ICE engines are so difficult to manufacture and why they cannot keep up with the costs in manufacturing. There's so many moving parts, and because of the moving parts, they need a higher maintenance. But they do continue to wear down. So if you buy a second-hand car, a petrol car, you're more likely to be paying for the cost of the car within a few years in terms of repairing and taking things out. Whilst in an electric vehicle, if there's anything that's going wrong, it's most likely it's going to be the battery, and it's just a swap of that. And most of the mechanics in that will continue to work quite well. This is what happens when you look inside a petrol car. So there's lots of parts. Well, it's very, very simple. And the benefits of doing this is you get a better design, you get lower center of gravity. With that lower center of gravity, you have a much better performance. Performance in the sense that the wheels are always on the road, so you can accelerate quicker, you can brake quicker for safety. When you're turning, you're not rolling around all over the place. So this is a benefit, which is the performance and the additional features that looking at an EV is not going to help you. You need to do a test drive. You need to talk to an owner. For petrol cars, you're paying at least on average, like the petrol cars that we all have. On average, my Lexus hybrid in 2007 to now, I still have it. The average maintenance is $1,000 a year. And the fuel cost, even for hybrid, is $2,000. That's the subscription model that they want you to continue. This is taken recently. Many places in the world, the police, the government services, they're converting to electric vehicles. And it's not because they like the fancy gadgets. The accountants are doing it. They're looking at the numbers. It's just saving so much money in terms of maintenance and the fuel. And for something like the police, they're just rolling around slowly. And the energy use is only when they're rolling the wheels. Whilst a petrol car, the engine is running all the time, whether you're going a meter per second or 100 meters per second. And that's another reason why EVs are better, because of the battery. The battery can sustain a house for 10 days. So to run a little computer there, it's minuscule compared to the power consumption. But to run a computer all the time in a petrol car, you've got to run the engine all the time. And who does that? It's not possible. So performance, we've touched on performance features and all that. Mainly about the center of gravity, acceleration, braking. The sound system, it's phenomenal compared to a petrol car. If you get into any $40,000 EV, you will find that the handling, the quietness, the performance, all this is equivalent to a $100,000 Mercedes, BMW, all these luxury cars. And that's the cost savings I'm proposing. Connectivity, because it's a lot of EVs, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. You're going to get all these technology that's coming with it. And the technology is also about seeing the road, safety features, etc. Not just your standard ABS, airbags, and so forth. Autonomous driving, that's something that's in the future. And that's the reason why I'm in the EV space. I would like to have a Tesla because they've been preparing for this decades in advance. And it's coming. And what that's doing is actually giving you convenience. Because imagine, you get out of your car, the car parks itself. You go to work, the car goes and picks up someone else. It's a convenience factor. But you cannot achieve that with a petrol car because they've got to run the computer, they've got to run the petrol, and so forth. And it's a legacy automobile who continue to think that way. That's all it is, just getting you from A to B and nothing else. And that's why they cannot achieve autonomous driving in the future. And there's a benefit of autonomous driving. And I have a graph of that later. Because with this, we will be getting less cars on the road. Most of the cars are parked 95% of the time. So in other words, the utility of the car is being wasted. Whereas an EV, when you're parked, is doing some work for you. It's doing a lot of work, and we'll get into that a bit later. Convenience. So when we talk about EVs, the myths out there is, oh, it's so inconvenient. It's so inconvenient because I've got to charge it. And that's really the main consideration, the reason why they're saying it. But you see these ads, and that's the reason why we believe petrol cars are better. Always the ads about outdoors and do stuff, but most of the time they're parked. And hardly who does that? Who does that at all? As a matter of fact, they need to be parked to refuel. But for petrol, for electric vehicles, we refuel, but we do something else. The problem with the EVs, when you go online, is that a lot of times to make sure it's an EV, it's next to a cable. So our mind says that, well, an EV has to be connected to a cable. And so we need to break out of that mindset. Lots and lots of pictures, always an EV, someone holding the charger. Most of the time, I spend hardly the time just holding the cable. You plug it in and you walk away. Just like you don't associate a mobile phone with a picture of a mobile phone and a plug. Who does that? You have a mobile phone, you're actually using it. So this is what happens for convenience. You fill up the car, you go to the petrol station, you're checking the price. Is it a good price? Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. You've got to select the right fuel, diesel, unleaded, and so forth. And then you're standing there for 5–10 minutes. Then you got to go in there and pay the cashier. And then you've got to return to your trip. While as an EV owner, well, you go to work. If there's a charger, you plug it in, you walk away, you do your thing. At home, most people have a power point. This power point here, that's 240 volts, 10 amps, very standard. You count all the power points in Sydney's garages, it's more than all the petrol stations in the world. If you count this room, there's so many power points. There's trillions and trillions of ways that you can charge a car. If you can charge a laptop, you can run your microwave, you can run your TV, you can charge your car. Turn it on, and there it is. Plug it in to a standard socket like this. I walk away. And because EVs have the technology, the computers, through the app, I can say, oh, it's stunning. I'm just going to start charging as long as it's plugged in. And it's become raining, I turn it off. You only need to charge in a public charging station when you're on a long distance or you haven't charged enough for the day. And a lot of them is you plug in, and when you finish, you unplug it, and you don't need to find a cashier. It's automatically gone through the phone app or through your credit card. These are features that are the consumers actually demanding. And if the petrol manufacturers, the ICE manufacturers are continuing the way they are, I don't know how they can make a living. And there's data that a lot of them are struggling to keep up with the way that the world's going. So we can do other things while parked. We can charge your home and charge your home. So a lot of EVs have bi-directional charging. That's a feature which is probably not on that list, but it is a convenience feature. If you are waiting for that and you're not driving very much, you're taking public transport, great. But if you're driving more than 50 kilometers a day, 40 kilometers a day, you're using a lot of petrol, you're paying for more maintenance, you've got an ICE car, then I think it's time to forgo that need, because charging back to the grid, back to the house is a very important feature in the future. It's very important for some people. For example, there's a blackout and you have someone who has a medical device, very, very important. So if that wasn't your case, yes, find a brand that can do that. But if that's not a big issue for you, then get a car that suits your needs. Or maybe buy a product that suits the purpose. For example, a dedicated battery charger for the house. Because at the end of the day, you may not be at home to back up the power if there's a power blackout. And also, if you're in Sydney, how often do we see a blackout? Very hardly often. Try not to make a purchase decision based on the very, very slight chance of something happening. Or else you'll be paying a lot for something that you're not using. And once you finish charging, just return to the vehicle. Now, I have solar panels, and that's the best time to charge your car. Nothing's better than charging for free from the sun. It's a very good feeling when you're driving. You're not contributing to the pollution. Every year, an EV can save about 4 tons of CO2, about 200 trees every year. I can't plant enough trees if I could, if I wanted to that much. Convenience factor, there's lots and lots of apps to show you. So if you go into App Store and you download an app like this, PlugShare, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, there's everywhere. And these are public charges, or the charges from people who have said, oh, I can have part of my garage for you to use. You just contact them through the app and they can let you get along if there was a need for it. It's always a good idea to charge to about 80% because it's very, very fast. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes from 10%, 20% to 80%, and you're off again. And 80% of 500 kilometers is about 400 kilometers. Most people drive 30 to 40 kilometers a day. I'll give you a perspective. From here to Botany and back, less than 40 kilometers. How often do we do that trip every single day? Not very often. And even if you're stuck in peak traffic, the battery will degrade the same amount as if you take 2 hours to go there versus 10 minutes, because the battery diminishes in the charge state by the kilometers, by the number of the wheels rolling, as opposed to sitting idling. Whereas a petrol car, if it takes you 2 hours and you only travel 2 kilometers, you're paying for 2 hours worth of the engine running. And that's where the hybrid comes in. And that's why I love the hybrid. But the hybrid, unfortunately, doesn't happen because you're not driving 5 kilometers a day, all the time. By the time you go 5 kilometers an hour, the engine kicks in, and really it's the engine. You're paying for the petrol that's doing the same thing. That's the way to charge it. And there's other sockets, the 15 amps. It's quite easy. Just unplug this connection and you're able to get a different source of electricity. There's another plug, can go to 30 amps, the round one, the orange ones. If you join these car clubs, they may even loan you one. If you're doing a long distance drive and you're not so sure if there's a supercharger or a fast charger or different kind of connection, some hotels, they've got this in place already for the caravans. It's the same thing, just plug it in. Charging speed. This is an example. 200 kilometers, a typical 200 kilometers, if you have a wall charger, which is hardwired to the meter box, you can get 22 kilowatts out of it. And that will give you about 1.5 hours to get you 200 kilometers. When I bought my first Tesla gave me a box that could do that. They also gave me this cable, this what we call a universal charging mobile charger. I've been using this all the time. The other one's brand new in this box for 5 years. I did not have the need for it. First of all, because I had to pay an electrician about $800. Now it's about $600 to install it. Next is that it's drawing 22 kilowatts. My solar system 6 years ago cost a lot of money, was 5 kilowatts. It can only give me 5 kilowatts. This one takes 2 kilowatts. So in other words, 2 kilowatts is going to the car and the rest is going to the house, and I'm minimizing the need to buy energy from the grid, which could come from coal, hydro, or whatever source. I'm trying to minimize my cost to myself as well as ensuring that the electricity is out there. If it's green, great. If it's not, at least I'm not using that gray electricity. Lots and lots of different cables. Let's talk about it once you get an EV. Don't concern yourself too much about the technicalities. It's very, very easy. I bought this only in the reason is that I go to expos and I just want to take it out and show people, but I hardly use these cables. And EVs, you can charge, in conditions like this. You won't get electrocuted and all that. Very simple. If you're looking for an electric vehicle, perhaps consider where the charge points are. So this is the front of the car, this is the back of the car. So The Tesla is around here, which is closest to the charging stand. And sometimes they're just designed for that distance. So you do yourself a favor. You want your first EV to be convenient. Try not to get something like this one, which is a bit harder to reach. Or maybe this one, because you end up parking on the wrong way at different angles, 90 degrees to everyone else. Manufacturers doing it because they want to differentiate themselves from Tesla. It's very crazy. I mean, would you make a new mobile phone with a square connection or a round connection just to be different from an iPhone? You're really separating your customers, making it very, very inconvenient. And who has been laying out the superchargers for the last 10, 20 years? You can't catch up with that time. Long distance, make sure you're just charging at the destinations. Bring ahead, has the hotel got it? It's very convenient. Sometimes you go there, you plug it in, they offer for free to attract the business. You wake up the next morning, you don't have to drive to the petrol station. You've got a full charge. You can go on another 400 or 500 kilometers. Pollutions and emissions. So as an early adopter, this is the reason why I had a hybrid, followed by the electric vehicle. But now, these days, most people are buying an electric vehicle because they want to save money. And that's okay, no problem with that. Now we're also getting some petrol heads who want the acceleration, who love it, who love the ride, negating the sound and all that. Yes, the vibration, that's a cool thing. But they're buying it now for the performance. And once they've got the EVs for these two reasons, or that third or fourth reason, they're finding out the convenience factor, which I didn't know when I bought my Tesla. I did not know I could charge from the sun. I could charge simply from a cable like this. So why do we need to use EVs? Because transportation is part of our daily lives. Doesn't matter what you do, there's always a carbon footprint. For example, this is a dental surgery. 64% of it is related to transportation. So if we can look at the way that we run the economy, the transportation, we can reduce our emissions big time. And we will not meet our net zero targets by 2030 if the transportation is not a part of that. You can have all the solar panels you want, but you're still burning the petrol. But the worst thing about the fossil fuel form of energy is that before it gets to your petrol tank, we've wasted so much energy to get the petrol, the oil from the ground. It just doesn't magically come up. They use a lot of electricity to pump it up. They use 3 tons of diesel generated each of those, the oil rigs a day, just to generate the electricity so that they can pump up the oil. Then they have to transport it. They have to refine it, which is using more electricity, and have to ship it around with petrol station, the Shell tankers and all that. So those people say, oh, if everyone got an EV tomorrow, there's not enough electricity. Just think about the electricity that we're already using to get the fossil fuel to our cars at the moment. It's actually 3-4 times more than just all the electricity alone for the electric vehicles. As a matter of fact, the pump jacks just on land, a month, they may be using as much electricity as to drive about 500,000 Teslas. That's the electricity that they waste just to get it, the liquid petrol into our petrol stations. And the other reason is, if you don't believe in emissions and climate change, think about the pollution. If you don't believe about the pollution, park the car in the garage, turn it on for a few minutes, that air is no longer sustainable. But EVs, for me, why I'm an advocate is I'm looking at the people living in apartments. It's not their fault. It's not that, it's their choice, like it could be my daughter who wants to leave her house and that's all she can afford. She can't afford a nice cul-de-sac street away from the traffic. It could be me. I'm trying to downsize in the future. A small property, an apartment. I want to be looking out of the apartment and enjoy the fresh air, but they're being punished They're being punished with thousand times more emissions than they actually generate for themselves. They might not even have a car. And we're talking about pollution, air pollution, but we also talk about sound pollution as well. So with all the sound pollution, that's creating a lot of anxiety as well, and heart disease and all these chronic diseases. So there's studies to say that the nicest cities are the clean cities, clean air, clean water. Convenience, so you can get to places easily with walking, cycling, public transportation. The best thing is not to replace a petrol car with an EV. Yes, it'll be nice if that's your only choice, but we need to think about getting smaller cars just to do the last mile transportation. That's the better way. As we get bigger and bigger cars, the roads get bigger and bigger. That pushes out the people who want to walk, the cyclists, and then that means that the traffic's going fast. The shops will not get any benefits because there's fast traffic. No one's going to shop while they're going 100 miles an hour. It's very beneficial for everyone. Air pollution, 7 million premature deaths a year related to pollution. That's a lot of wars that kill people. We fight over fossil fuel. That's the basis of a lot of wars as well. So we are indirectly putting our hands in creating these problems in the world. The energy security. Before I worked in private practice, I was a dentist in the Navy, in Australian Navy. One of the important things is about security. And security means that be able to be self-sufficient in whatever you have to maintain your society. So if you are relying on someone to provide you bricks, you can't build a house anymore. You might have supply for a couple of months. But if you cut the supply of fossil fuel to Australia, about 2 weeks, society will probably finish as the way we are. Because first of all, we don't have transportation. We may not be able to generate our electricity. There's no communications, no electricity, no communications. There'll be riots, you can't call the police, all these things. The Woolworths, all the fridges will just, how would they operate? Chaos. But energy dependency is a very important part of getting an EV. We import about $40 to $50 billion worth of fossil fuels to Australia. I have a thought here recently. If you could take an Australian-made Holden Commodore and a Chinese-made Tesla or BYD, and you took it 15 years later, which is more Australian? The Australian-built Holden Commodore or the Chinese-made EV? It's the Chinese-made EV because we generate our own electricity, either by the workers in our coal-fired stations or the workers doing the wind farms, the solar farms, whatever, or the people on our electricity. So although he's, it's just like someone who is non-Australian, they're Indian or whatever, but they eat food and they grow up in Australia. They're more Australian than someone who's Australian looking, but they're not doing Australian things. That's the way I look at it. This graph here is showing the projectile, the prediction of where EVs are. So petrol engine cars, as you see, there's a slump, and it's being replaced by electric vehicles. Some of them is by plug-in hybrids, because there's still a misconception, oh, by the way, we're not there yet. And it's a bit sad because, like I said, I had a hybrid in 2007, the battery's still going. So why are you concerned about that? Yes, there will be cases where you want to go in the bush for a long time and there's no electricity and all that. That might be, if that's the situation, fine, go. But there's plenty of people buying a plug-in hybrid that's driving around the city. And as the prediction is, the whole thing, this is the total volume of cars. So there is a point where we're actually reaching the maximum, where we're actually getting less cars in the world. And the reasons for that is some of these things. We're actually investing more in ride sharing. The apps on our phone is making it easier to take public transportation. I went to the city last night. I've never been for months, for years. And just over the app. It shows me exactly where the bus is. My daughter, second year university, she didn't even consider getting a driver's license. And as we live in more dense cities, it's not possible to get a car. So it's more and more convenient to rely on public transportation. And hopefully that public transportation will be based on electricity. Did you know that Sydney Railway is mostly electric? It's been electric for years. There's no issues. There's no people who say, oh, by the way, we've got too much. Let's have more electric trains. Yeah. But we worry about the electricity, how much we're going to power those electricity. So talk about the benefits of EVs, getting your first EV. Talk to an EV owner. That's myself. Go to NRMA. They have lots of these drive days throughout the year. They've got lots of different cars. AEVA, TOCA may come along and talk to you, answer your questions one-to-one. And then you can test drive it. Because nothing kind of beats the actual ride experience. It's like, I can say this orange is sweet. Doesn't matter how much I describe it, unless you try it yourself, then you know. And once you know, and it's really sweet, and that's the right shop, you'll be an advocate for that shop. Did you know that when you do your research, EV has been around for hundreds of years? This battery, this EV has got a range of 100 miles, and it's done the endurance for 1,000 miles. The only reason why we are the way that we are is Mr. Ford managed to create a way of mass producing a certain product that relied on a fossil fuel. And that's all it is. And it's very hard to undo it, but I think we've got the way. Because the technology with EVs now, we're combining all these other aspects and making a different product. That's the only way. If an EV is just getting you from A to B like in the past, there's nothing different. This one here will demonstrate what happens in just a few years. New York City, 1900, where's the car? One. 13 years later, the complete reverse. If you go back in time, you'll find all the naysayers, just like today. They say, well, we don't want to get the automobiles because what about the people looking after the horses? I can ride like Marco Polo from Europe to China and back without a petrol station. The technology will catch up. As a matter of fact, the way for EV adoption is a left foot and a right foot. You need to do them both together, one at a time. The more EVs, the more chargers. Don't wait for 1,000 chargers before you get your EV, because they need the momentum of EVs in the economy, on the roads, before they can put more public infrastructure. The infrastructure is already there for the people who have a house, for people who are living near a shopping center that's got the charges. But for the mass people, like living in apartments and all that, we're trying to advocate so that we have this momentum going. The more EVs owners there are, the more voters we are. We can influence our politicians. Go to expos. This is this gentleman here, Raphael. He's driven around the world. This is his 4th time in an EV. The first time is in 2011 in a Tesla Roadster. His range in a brand new car at that time was 280 kilometers. Most EVs now have over 400 kilometers, 500 kilometers easily. And he's managed to do that in 2011 when the supercharging network did not exist in Russia, in the middle of deserts of Kazakhstan, China, and all these. And the reason why he said it is because every place he traveled around the world, there's always a light globe. If you have a light globe, you have electricity, you can charge your car. It's just a matter of you want to charge it quick enough, that's all. But when you're traveling around the world in 80 days, it's not a race, it's a marathon. And he could do it. So it's very inspirational. Once you're on this EV journey, you start to talk to people, you meet so many wonderful people. And a lot of, right now, most of the EV owners, they're a bit more ahead of the curve, you know, early adopters. Podcast, like I said, the Fully Charged Show, it's very, very important. I learn a lot. So, because as an EV owner, Initially I said, you know, I just charge or I just walk away from the car, and then people will run out to me and say, why are you destroying the planet with your Tesla? It's very strange. It does happen. It used to happen. It's probably less so now. But now it's the other way around. I'm looking for opportunities to talk to people because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful product. You can talk to the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. Last year, it was our 50th anniversary. They were founded in the 1970s, the year I was born. Pretty much I didn't know about this problem, but we had a fuel crisis in the world, didn't we? So they were taking engines out and putting batteries in. They were thinking ahead. What would happen when we run out of oil reserves? As a matter of fact, I'm really not anti-fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is what we need to make a lot of products. Our cosmetics, our plastics, and so forth, our medicines. But to take it once and to burn it and then take more to burn it again is not sustainable. And we will come to a point where we'll be fighting for the last drop, like in times of Mad Max. I grew up in Mad Max. And with climate change, because of the pollution, we'll be fighting more than oil. We'll be fighting over fresh water and fresh air, places to make our foods. So this is an event I went to in Armidale. I would not drive a petrol car from Sydney to Armidale just to talk to people about how wonderful my car is. It took me probably about $80 worth of electricity return trip. And I thought I was actually an early adopter. I talked to this chap. He lives out in Armidale. He said, Stephen, I've got the EV just like you, a year before you. I love it. And the reason for that is, before that, he has to drive 30 or 40 kilometers to town and find out the petrol station's closed. Now he's just charging his car on his farm, on the rooftop solar on his barn. And he comes into town when he needs food and supplies and so forth. So in other words, energy independence already, you can see. And he's living in a country where there's less charges in the kilometers he's traveling. And that's very inspirational when you go out and talk and you're thinking you're helping people and they're helping you. Just like Raphael. I think I've beaten range anxiety, but I haven't traveled the distance that he has. So Australian Electric Vehicle Association, we have lots and lots of useful material. Brochures. We have fact sheets. So the fact sheets, like the NRMA at the back of the catalog, they've got prices here. They've got the range, the driving range. Do something that suits your need. But this is just early research. And then you need to talk to an EV owner to see what fits you. For example, even if you want a Tesla, which model? Is it a Model 3, Model Y? And then is it standard range, long range, and so forth. And because they all have different tire configurations, different comfort levels, different electrons to move them and so forth. Very comprehensive. We update it all the time. And this is volunteer run, all volunteer run. We're very passionate about it. Tesla Owners Club Australia. Reading The Big Switch can give you an insight into why we need to transition to renewables. And EVs and renewables are perfect match. And I actually love the book so much. I bought 10 copies. I got it signed by Saul Griffiths. I gave it to a few politicians. Hopefully they're reading it. But if you want a free version, just scan that QR code, download it. It's an audio book read by a few of our famous athletes. So how do we make EVs cheaper? I think the message is there. If you're not getting an EV, do your research, help others understand the technology. Don't start hearing misinformation and say, oh, there's hydrogen out there. It's going to stop someone who's on the fence that could potentially get an EV, get a hybrid, or get a petrol car. And in 30 years' time, that car is still running around, creating emissions. The world changes a lot in 30 years. And in a few years' time, people's conditions change. They may go overseas, they may upgrade their family, so they will sell the car. And most people actually buy a car or a house, second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand. And that's the way that you get cheaper EVs. And the more EVs we have, the mass production, like I said, from that initial slide, the Model Y, from $78,000 within 2 years, it's gone to $60,000. And when we are creating this volume of consumer need for EVs, the countries that are making the American way of driving, which is the left-hand steering, they're going to say, oh, that's a good market. I will convert some of my cars into the Australian side, the right-hand side. China has 700 different models of EVs. We've got about 2 or 3 dozen. It's staggering. You know, you can get a $2,000 EV from China. Of course, you look at that pie chart, you know, that Venn diagram, you know, you get for what you pay. It won't have the full self-driving, won't have all the other fancy gear. And of course, we've had to look at and support the politicians who are supporting these mandates. A lot of countries are going for 100% EV sales by 2030, 2035, 2040. Last year, Norway reached 90% of new car sales was an EV. And 90% of that was a Tesla. And a quarter of the time, in some places in Norway, is minus 30 degrees. And people are still saying, Stephen, I'm worried about the EV, you know, performing in cold weather and all these things. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Stephen. Very comprehensive summary there. I guess it's a very convincing argument. We should all get one. Firstly, we'll take questions from the floor here, and then we will take some questions online. So any questions?
I love difficult questions. Thank you. Stephen,
how far are we away from wireless charging of electric cars?
Oh. I really don't like the concept of that. I know that it exists. It's just almost like a first world problem. Just imagine the infrastructure that you've got to lay out all that to have this wireless charging. I know that in China they're doing, for example, the taxis at the stand, waiting for someone and it's charging. Is it effective enough? I think there's going to be energy losses in it as well. So we're getting EVs that are charging so quickly now. You know, we're going to a different architecture, the number of volts in a car. 20, 30 minutes is not a big deal for most people. Yes, it's probably suitable for the people who are doing the runs all the time. They don't want to stop and all that, but stopping is a quite important part of driving as well. There's many times I go on a supercharger. I plug it in, I walk away, and before I even bought my food or go to the toilet, I get a notification, it's 80% charge. I've got to run back to the car. It's too fast. And that's after a 3 or 4, 5 hour drive. You just can't drive for 1,000 kilometers. Most people don't have 1,000 kilometer back bladder. You find me, you solve that solution, then you know this is important. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for a really good big picture in the electrics. And so I'm on the verge anyway of buying, but I have some specific questions. The world is connected. Electric cars are connecting into that. Now, there's a lot of talk about vehicle to grid. You touched on it, but yes. You know, already with my Tesla battery at home, I'm running it as a giant battery for the AGL, turns it on and off when they want some. Yes. What about the electric cars that I can buy now? How many of those have really got that vehicle to grid up and running, number one? And number two, if we're all so well connected, is anyone talking about data privacy and how you'll stop, you know, people marketing and knowing where you are at any time in your travels, because the cars are very connected.
That's quite good. Look, if you're doing anything dodgy in the car, a Tesla, and you know that I can know exactly where my car is at the moment. In fact, if I turn on the app, I can see around the car. I can see inside the car. What's the pros of that? The pros is the safety feature. if my daughter is going in the hospital and she's 10 p.m., she wants to check the car before she gets to the car park. Right. You need to look at that benefit. The other side is someone spying on it. Okay, fine. Go into the car, turn the monitoring off. Can you be absolutely sure? Not really. I mean, you're walking in the street, there's cameras everywhere. How do you say, oh my goodness, I'll just live in the jungle? And then you miss out all the benefits of living in the city, medicine, transportation, people, etc. So try to put that into the connection, that perspective. I think so.
Am I waiting for the vehicle to grid a little longer? Is that a good policy, do you think?
Their cars are already doing it, like the Nissan Leaf. You know, they've got the Chadmo charging port, but those cars are very small battery.
Right.
They're not the new shape like this, design like this. I think that the Teslas will come out soon enough. The Cybertrucks are already doing it. A couple of months ago, there was a tornado going through one of the states, and no one could put petrol in the car. No electricity, you can't pump the electricity, the fuel into the car at the petrol station. So you can't charge your car, but you can't also refuel your car as well. And then the Cybertruck plugged in, the whole place was live again. But the thing is, you've got to have the car there to be able to give you this benefit. And for the cost of the wall battery, it's quite small compared to the cost of the car. You're paying for the whole stuff. And also, you're paying registration for the car, you're paying insurance for the car. I wouldn't buy a car just to charge the house. It's an additional bonus. It's outside of that. And that's why it makes it more attractive, but it wouldn't be the reason why I'm getting it. Yeah. And also the chemistry in the power wall and the wall chargers, they're different. They're meant to go for many more cycles, 5,000 cycles from start to finish. The cars may be 1,000 cycles because they have higher, different chemistry. They want to charge quickly, they want to discharge quickly. And after a certain number of cycles, the holding charge is not as good. But the good news is every bit of mineral that's inside your electric vehicle, inside your iPhone, etc., are completely recyclable. You can't recycle one drop of petrol. Tell me who can. You probably can, yes. You plant a tree, you make it these new biofuels, etc., but you're using a lot of energy just to make this drop of fuel that you're putting in the petrol car. And that's part of the misinformation. Trying to delay us from getting away from the status quo. And that's why I'm saying, try to use connectivity so that the misinformation will keep coming. And once you recognize that this is happening, it's so easy to see the facts and the myths and all that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stephen,
Yes.
excuse me. Is the New South Wales government buying electric vehicles into their fleet?
Yes.
And so their used electric cars, are they being sold now? And who sells them?
Okay. A lot of them actually, just like in the past, they've gone to Pickles auctions. And we're just waiting for that cycle to finish, and then there'll be lots and lots of EVs coming onto the market.
And what about imports of Japanese electric vehicles?
Yes, there was a company called the Good Car Company. And a couple of years ago, the idea was because there's not enough momentum, so they were importing the electric vehicles from Japan, because Japan has a policy where if the car's a certain number of years, let's say 3 or 4 years, it's actually more expensive to re-register that car. Just there's nothing wrong with the car, but I think their economy is based on making more cars, which is why they're so big on Toyota and all that. So they want to make the car, they want to get rid of them. And this is the market that this company was bringing in. But now they're no longer doing it because they're saying it's not cost effective anymore. The price of the new EVs are coming so cheap. And when they were doing that, I said, okay, that's great, but you're really shifting the pollution-free car from that environment to this environment, and you're using a lot of carbon, fossil transportation to achieve this. And so it was good, it was bad as well, in that sense.
I've got some online questions.
Yes.
The first one is FSD question mark.
Yes.
Do you know what that is?
Yes. So Tesla believes in FSD very, very much. If you haven't been looking at it long enough, then you're going to be caught out guard. I bought the first Tesla in 2019. I had 3 months of trial for free. After the first month, I saw Elon Musk talk for about 3 hours online. He didn't talk for 3 hours. Most of that was his engineers coming up and talking about the hardware that's actually built into the car. And so they explain, you know, it's got a left computer, right computer talking, et cetera, and the reasons for that. And the reason for that is sustainability. So if you can utilize the car instead of a 5% of the time when it's driving and 95% when it's parked, the car, if it can successfully do full self-driving, will be driving around, picking other people, making money for yourself and a bit for Mr. Elon. Right, he's the one that came up with the idea. But in other words, we're utilizing the manufacture of a product for more uses. And I think that's a good thing environmentally. And that's why that graph wasn't done by Elon. It was done by Professor Ray Wills. He's an Australian professor. He looks into data. And his predictions, if you go back to many graphs that he's done for years, his prediction is pretty much spot on. And in that graph, you also see as the number of ICE cars drop, we're actually displacing the amount of fossil fuel that we need to import. $40 billion a year is equivalent to like 50 Westmead hospitals a year. That's a lot of things that we can spend on. You know, hospitals, education, cost of living. Put $40 billion, you can put $10,000 in every person's house, pockets now to buy a new EV. It's phenomenal.
Can you recommend the BYD Atto 3 as a more affordable entry-level EV?
Yes, I think all EVs are pretty good, the ones that I've seen so far. The BYD Atto, that's great. It's got a nice, personally, I like the shape internally. Many people feel internally the design's a bit quirky, but if you just put that aside, it's number one thing, it's an EV, it's already saving lots and lots of money. The BYDs, they do have a vehicle to load. So at an expo, or if you're going camping, you plug it in, the adapter for here, it becomes a 240-volt output, and you can cook, you can do whatever you like. So there's some huge benefits there. Go get a BYD, that's your needs. For me, I actually buy a car because it has FSD. Simply because FSD for me, I've seen the transition from 2019, where I was driving like a Year 10 student on a P-plate, to about now for like someone who's in university for 3-4 years driving. It's probably a better driver than I am in most of the cases. The moment I disengage it, I'm all over the place. And it has braked before I've even realized there was something in the way. It's not perfect, but that's why I'm supervising at the moment. And there's about 5 different levels of FSD. We're at level 2 autonomy now, which means we've got to supervise. But I think the technology is here, but they just haven't said that yet, because here means that you can sit back, you can close your eyes, you can do whatever you want. You don't need to monitor. And Tesla's not at that position yet. But in America, for the same FSD software that you're buying in Australia for $10,000, they've got that capacity already. They've got that capacity to stop at the red light. If your navigation says do a U-turn or turn right, it will turn for you. In Australia, it hasn't done that yet. But a couple of months ago, it couldn't stop at a red light. Now it has. And sometimes I got distracted. I didn't see the red light. It stopped for me. It's like a very diligent backseat driver who doesn't complain, who doesn't get road rage. Because someone cuts across you, the car just slows down. I didn't know he cuts across me. I feel very relaxed. I use it 95% of the time in Sydney traffic, with a lot of traffic, everything. If you go into the car, you'll see my car here, and there's about 50 other cars all around me. Your eyes, your brain cannot assimilate, even behind me. It can see all that in every second. And right now, if I'm at a red light, I might see someone walking across. They may have a pram. They may stop. They may turn their head. You can see the simulation. In 2019, it didn't happen. It was just matchbox sizes. It's the same hardware. The hardware has got better through the software. And that's another message. When you electrify anything, you make the product better. Think of a candle. You cannot make it any hotter or any brighter. You can maximize a little bit. The moment you electrify, it becomes a light glow. You can turn it on, turn it off, and you will. You put it under the table, it won't burn. You put software to it because it's electrified. Now you can make it to an LED, change the color, turn it on and off when you're in Germany. And that is just something that people don't realize. And we're electrifying everything in our household, from our stoves, to our microwaves, to our communications.
Is there any way of getting charging to your car if you only have street parking?
Yes. So we look at the way that countries like Norway have done it. So there's a lot of ways. We need to treat it in multiple ways, just like a human, a person. We're not a finger, a paw, a leg. We're everything. And EV adoption and the way it is, we need to engage politicians, local councils, and sometimes we've got the funds, but you could have a councillor who have no idea about EVs, they're anti-EV. So we need to start to educate, and we need to start taking active role. And one way to active role is first get an EV if you can afford it, if it suits your situation, so that other people can see it. The first time I got an EV, it took me about 2-3 months before I saw another EV. Now it's everywhere. And it was a very short period of time. Think of that picture, New York City, 10 years. So we are rolling out different systems. And we talked to the New South Wales government, for example. They have in place thousands and thousands of these chargers, solutions like curbside charging. We're going to talk to shopping centers. Shopping centers will love this idea. For example, Westfield, at night, they close up the car park, it's not being utilized. Imagine if they could put a charger, they could make some money. People all around the apartments could park there. We'll get cars off the street. It's a win-win-win for everyone, but someone has to push for it, the consumers. Write a letter to Westfield, say, this would be a great idea. I will go shopping more if you have these EV chargers.
Can you explain how V2G/V2H technology works, and are all bidirectional charging already capable of vehicle to the grid/home?
No, I can't really say that, but I do know it exists. And look, the problems currently with the problem with vehicle to load, vehicle to grid and all that. Vehicle to load, you can control it because you're there. You're charging your laptop, you're cooking, etc. There's no other people. If you get electrical, it's your fault. Vehicle to house, that's another matter. Vehicle to grid doesn't matter. It happens vehicle to grid. Why? There's a power blackout. The linesman's out there in the street thinking there's no power. You charge back there. How does he know? So right now, it's not the technology. It's more the communication between different organizations to try to iron out how we're going to make sure it's safe and it's doable. Because the electricity grid is built around the fossil fuel industry, where they have a centralized power source and it's pumping this way. It's not bidirectional. The media, the same. You open a newspaper, it's one way. Now we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we talk to each other. The world is connecting. And, it's unfortunately like Facebook, Twitter, and all that, it's designed. But the infrastructure for the electricity grid, vehicle to load, vehicle to X, etc., it's not there yet.
Can I ask one question myself, which is, without mentioning countries, are there any modern slavery issues, supply issues that we should be concerned with?
I think that's also another consideration. And when I bought Tesla, I was considering writing a letter to Tesla and say, look, I'm happy to donate a certain money so that those people can get some kickbacks and maybe the village will be better. But did you know that Tesla actually has cameras, has systems in place that they want to ensure that no child labor, slave is being involved in that. They can't control if someone's going to sneak in, take a bit of dirt and then sell it on the black market. These are kids who would otherwise be child soldiers. Who's stopping them? Who's fighting for them? But the best way is Tesla and a lot of companies are taking the cobalt out so that you can't argue anymore that that car has got cobalt. And did you know that cobalt is actually used in the refining of fossil fuel, from crude oil to the petrol that you get at the Bowser? And they've been doing it for decades. And when it gets to your car, what happens to the cobalt? Burnt. It's not recoverable. The cobalt that's in the batteries, in your phone, in your laptop, it's there, it's not going anywhere. It's completely recoverable. So the misinformation is disinformation. It's taking up parts that are, you know, that is trying to deceive you. Yeah.
Okay, well, we might bring it to a close. And so can I get you all to thank Stephen for such a great presentation?